Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I remember when I was in I think 7th or 8th grade. You have to understand my high school the school itself when I attended when I started there was K through 12, and then they built an elementary, and it then at one point became 7th through 12th grade. Junior high all the way on up through, or I guess they call it middle school now. At any rate, 8th grade, I'm taking a typing class. And just let me kind of give you a little background on who I was. I wasn't dumb. I did well in school. I got A's, but I was a crack up. I was a cut up. I did unsatisfactory on citizenship, right? And I relished in that. I relished in being the smart kid who was the disruptor, the class clown, and it just, I enjoyed that. That just was my persona. Found myself standing out in the hall quite often. But I remember at one point, I was in this class, and again in 8th grade, and the typing teacher, something happened in the class. Somebody needed to take something to the office, and the typing teacher turned to a student, or pointed to a student, and said, let's have so-and-so do it, not me, have so-and-so do it. We can trust them. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. And I wasn't blaming the teacher. I knew in that instance that I had nobody to blame but myself. That this persona I was creating for myself of being the cut-up, and there's nothing wrong with laughing. I'm still the cut-up. I've got endless yards of self-deprecating humor. But I knew in that instance that persona I was created that situation, and it bothered me. I didn't want to be the person who wasn't. Literally the teacher's pointing around me, For a second I thought it would be me, and it's like, no, the person behind you, Mary, get away, Frank. And it bothered me, and I just decided in that moment that, I didn't want to be that person anymore. I didn't, it's okay to be a cut up, but I didn't need to lean into it as much as I did, or I was. And I remember coming back to that class the next day and just saying, I'm going to lean into doing well in this class. I'm not going to be a disruptor. I'm going to listen. I'm going to be the person. I'm going to do well, and I'm going to be someone of good citizenship. And it didn't take long for the teacher to notice. She said something to me at one point. She said, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I didn't explain what I was doing. I don't think I need to explain what I'm doing. I think that takes some of the glamour, some of the authenticity out of just being a new person, of having a different personality, if you will." And I remember something coming up similar to the last thing, and she pointed at me and she said, "Let's have Frank do it. He will get it done. He's a good student." And I was proud in that moment. I had changed somebody's mind about me. And I think we all have parts of our personality that we want to change. I was looking through a study, and it went through and it talked about the 3 most popular ways people want to change their personalities. 87% of people want to be more extroverted. Okay, I get that. I think we tend to see in society, and certainly within networks, that the extroverted, that's the perception that the people who are extroverted tend to rise up. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. There's, I don't have empirical evidence with respect to that, but I think that's the sense, and people would like to be that way. And there are certainly situations where I would like to be more outspoken and I'm not. The second thing, 89% of people want to be more agreeable. Again, I think that's something, and I'm dealing with the sample size of 1 myself, right? I need to try and be more agreeable. I see a side to me that I don't like. And it's not a horrible side. It's not, it's not evil or anything like that. But I find from time to time that I can be disagreeable. And I know other people who agree. Well, they certainly agree I'm a disagreeable, but they'll agree that they're much the same way. That it's, certainly when I see an injustice, even if it's a mild injustice, I'm going to dig my heels in, and I have to learn to be better with respect to that. Um, 97% of people want to be more conscientious. Yeah, okay. Um, I would like to be more conscientious as well. Just little things. I was in the grocery store yesterday with my wife. We got a big old cart full of stuff. There's a woman behind us. She has a 2 liter of pop and something else. I don't know what it is. I just pointed to her. Go ahead of me. This is crazy. And she thanked me and she went ahead of me. And, big deal. It's not a, I would have felt stupid otherwise. But then the woman went through and didn't have enough money to pay for her 2 liter, and I didn't pay for it. And my wife was like, I can't believe you didn't do that. And, to be honest, in that moment, I felt a little bit used, right? There are self-checkout aisles for somebody with perfect for somebody with 2 items. At any rate, you know what? I should have done it. Maybe I was being used. What are we talking? $2.25 for a 2 liter of pop. Big deal. Somebody wants to game you for that amount of money. It's not a big deal. But I just need to be more conscientious. I think we all can. I think we all can. The question is, we all want to be nicer. We all want to be more social. We all want to be perceived as being more hardworking. The question is it possible to change? That's the question. Is it possible to change? And there was a study that was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and it tested out people's attempts to change their personalities. Now, again, I'm a sample size of one. I changed how I was perceived. I changed the persona I brought to my typing class. And I tried to do it in other classes. And don't get me wrong, through high school, through college, I was the crack up. But I stopped being that disruptor, right? There are moments where the teacher's calling on you to give an answer, and you can throw in a cute little one-liner before you give the answer. So you can be funny and not be the disruptor at the same time, and still be a good student. And that's really kind of what I tried to turn into. And it started in that typing class with that teacher. And so a lot of us want to change our personality, and when it comes to relationships, personality matters. Personality. The person who the person who is perceived as being sarcastic, antisocial, a slacker. People don't want them in their lives. The person who's always got to be the center of attention. People don't want that in their life. They want a little breathing room too. And people who on the other spectrum are always up, the wallflower. People don't even know they're in their life, and so they need to change as well. The question is can you change that personality? And so, in this study, what they did was they asked participants about their goals for change, and then tested them each week, and it wasn't easy for people, and I don't want to say there were these grandiose changes, but over time, people started to have some changes. Now, their goals needed to be a little more specific than, I want to be less antisocial. That's really kind of vague. What does that mean? So it needs to be a little more specific, and I need to force myself not just to go to the event and stand against the wall, but I need to go to the event and I need to have 3 conversations where I learn these sorts of things from somebody. I'm finding out about them, they're finding out about me, and they turn into follow-up conversations. Something very specific about that. So it says in here, for example, if you want to be more social, you might say to yourself, If I see someone I know, then I'll go over and say hello, and kind of keeping a tally of those sorts of things. And I know people who are like that. They'll see somebody that they know, and they'll just kind of avert their eyes, like, "Oh, geez, make me invisible, make me invisible." And I try not to do that. I feel it. I feel it happening. Um, I was in church the other day and I saw somebody, I waved at them. They saw me, I saw them. I could have just, it was just a quick glance. I just turned back and waved. I mean, church wasn't going on, so it wasn't disruptive. Yeah, I'm not disruptive in classrooms, just in churches. But I made the point of doing that. And they had a big smile, and it makes people feel good. It makes people, that you're acknowledging them, if you will. Um, so it's just this notion of kind of being intentional and leaning into it, and really kind of having a tally as to, okay, when am I failing at these things, essentially keeping score, and when am I doing well. And I think it's as simple as having a scorecard of, it depends upon what you want to change. For me, I didn't do this back in 8th grade, but to have a scorecard, how many times I can get through typing class or any class without being disruptive, just working with the normal flow of the class and not being disruptive, and give myself, a check mark, a little pat on the back, just something I'm doing. And if I'm not able to do that, I don't get a check mark. And so what that does is it just starts to, make you more conscious of the things that you're trying to change. Now, a good example of this that I use is, and I've actually did a whole podcast on this. It was episode 339, and the title of the episode is The Giving Journal. It was released on June 29th, 2021. And I may re-release it here in the coming months. I've just been starting to recycle episodes, doing new ones, doing interviews, recycling episodes just to bring things to the top. But the Giving Journal, and what the focus of the Giving Journal is, or was, or is, because it's out there, is it just talked about. I talk about it in it how I became more intentional about helping other people. And it was a simple matter of just having a journal in front of me where I quickly documented the date when I did something and what I did. That was it. That's all I had to do. And I wasn't using it as a means of keeping score. It was simply a means of keeping track of when I was doing things for other people. Because it's easy to say, well, I'm generous. And then your mind gets fixated on something that you have done that's generous. I paid for the groceries for the woman in front of me or the person in front of me. And then hanging on to that for months, as that's the evidence that you are a generous person. And while in that moment you are the generous person, it doesn't mean you're a generous person, because there could have been any number of other things where you could have added value to the world around you and you failed. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be that person. I wanted to become that person. At least I wanted to know I was that person. That's really why I started to do it, just to track. Am I really generous, or have I just deceived myself into thinking that I am? And what I found was, and I explained this in, again, episode 339, the Giving Journal. What I found was by keeping a journal, I found that I was becoming more intentional about doing things for other people, because I didn't want to I didn't want to have the evidence to show that I wasn't generous. So in essence, and I don't know what it was before then because I hadn't kept track of it. I'm sure it wasn't anywhere near as good, but I developed a habit of, when I'm talking to somebody, thinking in my mind, okay, how can I help this person? What do they need? Maybe it's being on my podcast. Maybe it's being on somebody else's podcast. Maybe it's an introduction. Hey, I have this article I think will be perfect for you. Or a lot of times I'll be talking to somebody and they're explaining what their business is about. And I will tell them, I'm like, listen, let's take a few minutes here. Let's figure out how we can help you define yourself better. Because if people can't figure out what you mean, they're not going to refer you. They're not going to do business with you. They may like you. They may think you're great, but they're just not. But anyhow, that's the Giving Journal, and that's just kind of, again, my evidence, my sample size of one, if you will. It's just me. You might have totally different experience, but that was my experience. And it talks similarly in this article about people changing their personality. A lot of it is just, again, leaning into it and sort of documenting and being intentional. And they call it, it forms a virtuous circle, a virtuous cycle, if you will. There's the vicious cycle where things just keep spiraling down out of control. But there's this virtuous circle as well where things just spiral up and spiral up. So, if I'm in the typing class and I'm not the disruptor all of a sudden, and I'm being looked to as a trustworthy person in the class, and Frank, I need you to take this report down to the office ASAP because I know you can do it, that's just going to reinforce the behavior that I've had of not being a disruptor, of being a good citizen of Mrs. Olson's typing class, if you will. And I get it. We can laugh about it, but it has broader applications. So the point of this episode is that we can change our personalities. We can decide to be more extroverted. We can be more agreeable. We can be more conscientious. We just have to decide we want to do it. And have specific goals around what you want to do. Maybe track, behaviors that head you in that right direction. Not maybe. Track behaviors that head you in that direction. And then just kind of revisit it from time to time. You will find, as time goes on, that you are more of those things. You're deemed to be nicer. You're deemed to be more social. You're deemed to be a hardworking person. And you'll just want to lean into it more and more. It'll really become part of who you are. And in essence, at that point, you will have changed your personality.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.